Jennifer, let me now introduce Jennifer Cook. Jennifer helps property owners, developers and managers create award-winning experiences and high-performing places that customers love. She has more than 20 years experience creating great destinations with clients, including AMP Capital Real Estate, ARA, Frasers and Visionary Investment Group. Some of her recent projects include Quay Quarter on Sydney's Circular Quay, Pacific Fair, Indooroopilly and Macquarie shopping centres. Originally, we had asked Jennifer to share with us her thoughts on how local and international trends will shape the future of retail and shopping centre design. While she is still going to do this, she's also going to share some of her initial thoughts on what some of the impacts of the current health crisis will be on the future of retail design. Thanks so much for joining us today, Jennifer, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Shawn. Really appreciate it. Okay, so hopefully everyone can hear me clearly, and I'm just going to apologise in advance. I'm sitting in what has got to be the leaf blower capital of Australia, so occasionally you might hear a little bit of background noise, but hopefully we can manage it and get through. And I'll try and pause as often as I can for those questions if you'd like to ask anything, but you can keep it relaxed and see how we go. So I want to talk about just what we're going to discuss today. As Shawn said, we've been talking about doing this webinar for a while, and it was really a lot about trends in retail and shopping centres. It still is about that. But I thought it was really important, considering what's happening in the world with COVID-19, that we talk a little bit about what might be important in shopping centres, you know, in the future. And I'm not going to make any predictions here or give any solutions. This is just more about what are the things we think might be important. And I know there's lots of engineers on the call, and you guys are the solutions guys. So I'm just going to suggest some of the things that I think might matter, and we'll see what happens as you know, the situation develops. And I've also had lucky enough to be able to consult an epidemiologist on some of these things too. So it's not just my uninformed opinion, because I'm not a health expert, but I've talked to someone at length about it, and so hopefully there's a little bit of science behind some of those ideas as well. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on generational drivers, because that's the subject of another webinar entirely. What does Generation Y want? What does Generation Z want? What does Generation X want from shopping? But I thought I should talk about it for a couple of minutes, because this is something that always comes up when I'm talking to people. It's about, oh, you know, it's the end of retail, and you know, there's not going to be shopping centres anymore, and we don't need it because we can buy online, and all the digital natives, they just want to shop online. Well, I just thought it'd be important to share a few things, because this Gen Z is kind of like the up and coming generation in terms of the the key customer in the future. So knowing how they shop and what they think of shopping centres might really surprise you, but it gives a really firm foundation for believing that shopping centres have got a really important role to play in our future. It's just a different role to what it is now. So I sort of dipped into a report by an American research firm that does a lot of research, A.T. Kearney, and just pulled out a few insights. So it's really interesting that Generation Z, 81% of Gen Z prefers to shop in store, and that may come as a surprise to you, and 73% like to discover new products in stores, but they're really more so than Gen Y. They're actually really into the shopping centre experience, and that's not to say that they like shopping as I do or as my parents did. They think of it in a whole new way, but they absolutely see visiting shopping centres as part of their life, and really important to them. It's just the way that we deliver the experience has to change to suit them. So I think that's really encouraging statistic as far as designing for the future goes. More than half of, in this survey, more than half of Gen Z said that shopping in stores allows them to disconnect from social media and the digital world. So they recognise that because they were born connected, they recognise that they need to get off of the digital world sometimes and actually have real world experiences, and they see shopping and shopping centres as a way to do that. So it's really interesting. It's different from Generation Y and potentially different from older generations as well, is that they don't know the world without the digital. So the fact that they can do both is just natural to them. So they still see the shopping centres as having a really important role. So I guess I won't want to talk too much more about generations, but I wanted to sort of say that we firmly believe that there's a role for shopping centres going forward. It's a big role. It's just about changing to suit this new customer. So let's start talking about some of the trends that we're seeing in retail. The first one is a big one, and this has been impacting everything I've been doing over the last 5 years. So everything is mixed use. When I first started working with shopping centres and property, we talked about commercial, we talked about retail, we talked about residential, we talked about, you know, entertainment destinations. They are really converging now. Pretty much every project that I am working on, whether it's a new project or a major redevelopment, is creating mixed use. So people want to live in the same place, they want to work in the same place, they want to get, you know, do their shopping in the same place, they want to get their entertainment in the same place. It doesn't mean they don't want to go anywhere else, but they're certainly expecting that they can get what they need in the one place. And the example I've just shown there is this place has been around for a little while, so you may have seen lots of pictures online because it's very Instagrammable. This is the Rotterdam Market Hall, where they recreated the city's old market, and they brought it back, but then they built residential and office around it, and then created this amazing sort of art installation in the middle. So it's very much a place where you can eat, live, shop, and be inspired in the same place. And that's probably a really dramatic example from the Netherlands of this trend, but it's something that definitely we're seeing. Everything is mixed use now. So it's live, work, eat, play, learn all in the one place is a really big trend, and that trend is being embraced by shopping centres as well. One of the clear examples of this is the rebirth of the library. Now, I wouldn't have picked this one 10 years ago when everyone was talking about, oh, you know, the libraries are relevant, we can get everything, you know, online. It's amazing, the libraries that are now coming online, and a lot of them are coming into shopping centres. So you know, they're different to the library that you and I know. Of course, you can go there and get books, but there's lots of things that you can do there that, you know, you can do gaming, you can and do maker studios, you can learn, you can do all sorts of hands-on things. But I think the rebirth of the library is a really important thing and really interesting for major shopping centres. And I think it's almost, in some places, it's becoming the new anchor. And I would not have picked that 10 years ago. So there's some amazing models out there, and I think it's really important that the role that a library can play in shopping centres, and that's all part of the drive to shopping centres becoming places where you have experiences, not just to get stuff. The other thing that we're seeing in shopping centres, this has happened a lot overseas, it's just starting to happen in Australia in a big way, is bringing co-working into shopping centres. It kind of makes sense when you think about it. So if you're not tied to an office, or, you know, you're sick of working at home, which I'm sure a lot of us are right now for other reasons, but in sort of more normal times, there are a lot of freelancers out there. There's a lot of people looking for other places to work, and shopping centres are a really convenient choice for them. Because there's parking provided, there's gyms, there's you know, they can do all their shopping. So why not be at a place where that you can work as well? And some of these larger format ones are interesting to a lot of owners because of the fact that they've got excess department store space that they're needing to fill. And we're not talking about, you know, 100 square metres, we're talking about whole floors. So bigger format offers like co-working are being looked really closely at by owners in that at the moment, as to how can they form part of the offer of the shopping centre. The other one, which I think is interesting, I mean, there's heaps of examples around this trend. I'm just going to show you a few for each, is the rise of co-living, which might sound really appalling idea to a lot of us, but this is something which Australia is only just starting to see the beginnings of, but it's sort of more established in North America and in Europe. whereby you can actually, you basically you buy or you rent a really small space, and you share a lot of your common area facilities. So you might have a big shared kitchen which you can book, and you know, if you want to have 10 people over for dinner, you can book a table and you can all eat together, but it's a common shared space, shared recreation, all those sorts of things. A lot of those in overseas are also becoming part of, slowly, and it's very early days, but becoming part of the shopping centre model. It's something definitely I think would appeal to a younger generation. But then if you think about it, a lot of actually retirement communities operate on this similar model, is that you sort of downsize, but then you share the spaces that you might not need every day. You know, not that many of us need a dining room table for 10 people every day, but we might use it 3 times a year. So, so co-living is another example that's potentially coming into these mixed-use developments and is of interest to shopping centres. But it's very early days for Australia. So with regards to co-living, I would say watch this space. Okay, so the other trend, which is a huge one, that's not that new. It's been we've been watching this one for a while. Is shopping as entertainment, and when I say entertainment, I mean that in a broad sense of you know, being entertained, but then also learning something new. So a lot of consumers are sort of looking to their shopping centre to provide these things, experiences, not just buying stuff. So we're seeing cooking classes, we're seeing art schools, we're seeing things like the School of Life, which is basically, you know, teaches you life skills. But there's all kinds of models under this edutainment idea. And I think that comes from a sort of a broader societal trend about people sort of saying, well, you know, I can get entertainment anywhere. I can sit at home and I can watch Netflix, or I can watch things on YouTube. But where do I get a hands-on experience? Where can I actually connect with people, learn how to make something, learn how to do something, you know, meet people that are like-minded? Shopping centres have a huge role to play in this area in terms of you know, facilitating some of this kind of engagement and these sorts of activities. But there's a whole raft of them. You couldn't possibly cover them all in this period of time. So the insight behind that is that consumers can get stuff anywhere, but what they want is experiences to learn, to grow, to create. So what role do shopping centres have in facilitating some of those experiences and you know, moving from being that place where you just get stuff to that place where you can learn something new, you can have an experience, you can acquire, you can you know, become a better, richer person, I guess. Okay, so another one is esports arenas, which I think is really interesting. This one's can often, people's awareness of what's happening in esports, or even what esports mean, can often, I've found out that people that have children often are like, yeah, I know what that is, and then people who don't are like, what are you talking about? So just not assuming that everyone has heard of the esports trend, but basically it's computer gaming in a small stadium environment. And this is huge business. They have international leagues of this stuff. There are actually shopping centres in Australia that's starting to introduce these in a small format. So we're talking about sort of maybe 5,000 square metres. Emporium Melbourne is an example. They've just put in a whole floor of an esports arena. I think this is huge. It may sound really niche if you're not into gamers, or you don't know anyone who's a gamer. You might think of people sitting at home in the dark in their bedroom and never coming out and not spending any money. But this is actually a huge social activity, and I think we're just going to see this growing more and more and more. And I think it's a really interesting one for shopping centres because of the space that it can occupy and the demographic that it brings into the centre. So it's another one that owners are thinking about when the department stores are downsizing and they're looking to fill larger spaces. And this trend, I guess, is not just for new uses. This is about retailers offering something different, or, you know, giving customers a new experience, but still selling products, of course. So Nike is always kind of ahead of the curve in terms of testing new things and innovating and coming up with new ideas. And the Nike House of Innovation is a good example, where you can actually go in and you can customize your own Nikes on the spot and take them home with you. So so that also provides an experience. So it's almost like a design, you know, creativity experience, where you can go in and you know, create your own design. And we're seeing a whole lot more of this with international retailers. Levi's are offering this as a service in store. You know, you buy a pair of jeans and you can customize them however you want before you leave. And personalization and the ability to make something feel unique is really important to Gen Y and Gen Z. So that's something that we're going to see successful retailers doing more and more of, experimenting and seeing how can they provide an experience within the context of a retail store that you can't get online. Any questions, Shawn? I'll just pause.
Yeah, sorry, Jen, there is one that's just come in. So
great.
Catherine asks, how are developers overseas actually incorporating the co-living concept into retail precincts, and is there a trend towards multi-generational living in those?
What we're seeing is things like towers on top of shopping centres. We already have that in Australia. A lot of the, particularly with changing planning laws, a lot of the developers are seeing the opportunity to potentially do something different with the property. So a lot of the bigger properties that I work on have long-term master plans that have residential towers, etc. on top. But the idea of doing it in a more of a co-living model is something that's being explored. I guess it's probably something that's happening more in those dense European cities and American and Asian cities, but we may start to see that in Australia. A few developers are putting their toe into the water. It's just a matter of getting the model to stack up financially as well. But I think we're going to be seeing more of that, and a lot of it is about adding additional space on top of existing properties. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's also a slight move towards that with places like West Village and West End as well, which are starting to have that village feel.
Yeah, I think so. I think so, and I don't think it's 100% clear yet on who the target audience for those is. I mean, obviously, it sounds like, you know, young people, and then there's the sort of the seniors living aspect to that as well, because it is similar to sort of a seniors living model where there's shared facilities. But I think it's going to evolve, and I think often with these things we try to pin it on a particular age group or a particular generation. Often it's about life cycle. So if I'm a sort of a, you know, 40-something dink and I've never had children, I might be happy with living like a Gen Y person might be, because I just don't need that space. So I think it's really important to think of people in terms of what life cycle they are in, rather than how old they are, in terms of what might suit them. I think it's an interesting model, and it's definitely one to watch.
Yeah, and also just I was a bit slow to jump in before when you're talking about esports.
Yeah.
Ben Gove has made a comment that esports is huge. Tonight's first live V8 supercars will be broadcast. Global esports is valued around $1 billion currently. And I noticed also that F1 is also entering that space as well, quite substantially.
Oh, it's massive. It definitely is. And you know, if for anyone who thinks that there isn't any money to be made on this in terms of shopping centres, Louis Vuitton has come out as a sponsor for the biggest esports event in the world, which is held in Europe each year. I think it's called League of Champions or something. I'm not an expert in this, so I can't remember the name. But they're producing merchandise and the trophies and all this kind of stuff, and you can guarantee that they wouldn't be doing that if there wasn't some money to be made in retail. So I think it's a really interesting one to watch as to who's getting involved in that, and a really big area.
So thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we'll keep going. Okay, so food's been a big one, driving remixing of shopping centres going forward in the last few years. So food is really about social glue. It's about all occasion, getting people together for all different occasions and driving longer shopping centre body clocks. And what we talk about when we say body clock, it's about sort of looking at the shopping centre and going, right, okay, so most of my customers come between, say, 8 and 5. So my property is sitting idle in a lot of cases in the evenings and night and early morning. How do I create offers that get people there and have it be more productive for more hours of the day? And one of those clear things is food. So offering more breakfast and morning options, offering evening options, moving up into different categories. So we're looking at shopping centres putting in outdoor dining precincts that are, you know, a bit more of a lift, I guess, in terms of the quality of the offer, and even moving to sort of that more fine dining offer. But the more the more sort of categories and occasions they can fit, the more the more likely they are to sort of stretch what we call is the body clock of the centre. And I'll just sort of talk about one of the big trends that's happening in that. It's starting to happen in Australia now, is food courts being on the way out and food halls being on the way in. Anyone who spends a bit of time overseas, particularly in North America and in Europe, has potentially had a food hall experience. They are not just another word for food court. A lot of people say to me, oh, but that's just a food court. We've had those for decades. It's a really different experience. Often it's a sort of a more, I think it's more food driven, and it's more of a cohesive experience as well. Where in a food court, you might sort of say, okay, well, we've got, 15 tenancies, and whoever goes into those gaps just sell what they sell, and there's a bit of common area seating and that's it. But the food hall is really about, a really curated experience that everybody, that is kind of a more environment that is got a very specific ambience. A lot of them have music, entertainment, they serve alcohol. It's a really different experience to the old food court, and there are huge number of those opening every year in the US, and Australia's just starting to open some. So I think we're going to see that as a real shift. And it's really going to put a lot of shopping centres that still have the food court old model under pressure, because it's not meeting customers' needs anymore. So they need to sort of think about, are we in the right market, and is it the right time for us to sort of think of more of a food hall model and potentially get more hours of productivity out of the day because of that.
Sorry, Jen, if I could just jump in with another one.
Yeah, go for it.
Yagan Nadu asks, where there is a shift in land use, are there any trends in buying up blocks of old warehousing and converting these into mixed-use shopping centres?
Yeah, well, we're seeing a lot of urban regen projects, like a lot of infill projects happening, where people are looking at doing mixed use. I don't know what the trends are, I guess, from an economic point of view, but I've certainly been working on some projects where it's definitely been about infill and about bringing in new uses. So, for example, I'm working currently on Key Quarter down at Circular Quay, where taken a precinct that's very heavily commercially driven. I don't know if anyone's from Sydney, but if you pop down to Circular Quay on a weekend or a weeknight, there's sort of not much going on down there. It's a pretty soulless experience, unless you're going to one of the arts venues or the Opera House or catching a ferry. But that project is bringing in, of course, commercial, because premium office space is still a good, strong market. Well, it was a couple of weeks ago. We'll see what happens. But also residential, also that food hall experience, also laneway experience, also public space. So I don't know what the numbers are around that, but certainly anecdotally, I'm working on a lot of projects that are doing exactly that, looking at land that's perhaps not being well utilised, or it might be a warehouse that's not being used at all, and sort of saying, well, how do we use that to create something that's kind of mixed use and has a lot of different things that customers can do there beyond just shopping or just one particular use.
Excellent, thank you.
So just in this food area as well, this one's really interesting to me, the ABC Cooking Studio franchise. Actually, it's not a franchise, but it is a large chain. There's about 140 of these in Asia. They started in Japan, and they're expanding at a very rapid rate. So younger generations, smaller apartments, not people are actually moving out of home and not being able to cook. So the idea of actually acquiring a skill such as cooking is becoming is a big trend. And so ABC Cooking Studios open up through about 130 shopping centres across Asia, and it's a place you can go, you learn to cook, you meet people. It's a real social experience. But I think this one is interesting because, like the esports idea, they require a fairly decent sized format, and it provides that experience that people are looking for. So whilst the ABC Cooking Studio is not in Australia yet, I think something like this is going to be something that we're going to see a lot more of over the next few years. But it's all being driven by the same trends. It's about having an experience, it's about learning something new, and it's about connecting with other people. around a like-minded community. And I think these sorts of uses provide some really interesting challenges in terms of development and construction, because they have a whole lot more needs, than if it was a large clothing store, for example. So they need, you know, the power needs, the water needs, the ventilation needs. They're all completely different to what might have been in that space previously. So a lot of opportunity there to sort of come up with some smart solutions behind the scenes. The next one, everything is wellness. The concept of, you know, what role does a shopping centre have to play in wellness is kind of really expanded beyond what it was, say, 5 years ago, where, you know, wellness was about, oh yes, you know, we've got a physiotherapist and a nail bar and a medical centre, and that was wellness. But now it's really about, you know, every aspect of the environment, making people feel better and feel good. So the image that I've got on the screen now is a render, because this is Burwood Brickworks, which is a shopping centre with a large productive rooftop garden. It's only just open stage 1, I believe. So I don't have a picture of the full thing to show you just yet, but they're putting a fully productive urban farm on the roof. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this sort of combining of, you know, of food production and environments to make people feel better, and green environments and places that you just want to spend a little bit more time. So I think this one's particularly interesting. The insight is that consumers want wellness to be lifestyle embedded. So it's part of the environment, it's a part of materials, it's part of shopping, it's part of services and leisure. It's not just an add-on. It's just not a few more categories or a few more tendencies that we add that have a wellness tenet in them. It's more about an overarching kind of philosophy, I guess, of the place, and thinking about wellness in a really broad sense as well, not just about fitness and allied health services. It's about how the place feels when you're in it. It's, you know, green, it's fresh air, it's sunlight, it's all those sorts of things. And I think destinations that really kind of get onto that and nail that idea will do extremely well, because Generation Z is particularly interested in wellness. They consider their lives to be very stressful. Make of that what you will. But it's what, you know, it's what they perceive as important. I guess it's driving a lot of this is that they are really seeking out these environments that they feel contribute to their health and well-being. Some retailers that are doing some interesting things in this space. So Lululemon, which is the huge Canadian international chain that sells fitness wear gear and yoga gear and all that kind of thing. They've been doing fitness classes in store for quite some time, so that's not a new thing for them. But now they've started launching these new concepts in the States, where they basically create a whole lifestyle store. So their stores have a full restaurant in them. Their stores have not just a bit of space where you could do some yoga once a month. They actually have full-scale studios. They have full-scale co-working facilities. So they're really developing quite a big footprint, and it's all around the Lululemon lifestyle, not necessarily just the clothes that they sell. And we're seeing a lot of this happening, where particular brands and retailers are saying, well, you know, I've got this customer who's really interested in wellness, they're really interested in healthy life. What other aspects of their life can I help deliver on in terms of living the life that they want? And so that might be a healthy workplace, it might be healthier food, and we're seeing a lot of this happening, and they take quite a bit of floor space, so it's a really interesting one to watch. Lifetime Fitness is really interesting to me. I'm sort of, this is not in Australia. So Lifetime Fitness it's in North America, started off as a gym, a big gym that offers a lot of different services. So, you know, fitness and yoga and child minding and all those kind of things. But they have started expanding the size of their footprint to such a scale that they can now take over an entire department store site just with one fitness retailer. So anyone who's spent a bit of time in the States would know that the US has a lot of these kind of big sort of blob spaces for, you know, the Macy's and the Coles and all the different sort of brands that had a big free standalone kind of tendency. And because the States has been suffering from I guess, because, well, I should go back and say the States, at the peak of shopping in bricks and mortar shopping, the States had 3 times more retail space per person than Australia did. So when online shopping became a thing, they have suffered a lot more than I think Australia will, although there's still probably a lot of pain to come with some retailers in Australia. But one of the things it meant was that a lot of these great big empty department store spaces sitting out there in the open in the middle of car parks. Well, Lifetime Fitness has such a big footprint that they are able to take the whole thing. So the picture that you're seeing now would have formerly been, I'm not quite sure, it would have been a Macy's, it would have been one of those American Sears, one of those American discount department stores, and they've taken the entire thing over. And so they offer fitness, they offer child mining, they offer medical services, they offer allied health, they do childcare, they have swimming pools, play, food, their own food courts. They're just this massive wellness concept. And I think that that's really, really interesting because, you know, as they move across the states, whether we'll be seeing something like that in Australia and whether we'll be seeing fitness and wellness providers actually taking over some of these huge spaces. I think it's really interesting, and I look at what Lifetime's doing and it kind of amazes me, but, you know, potentially we'll see something like that in Australia. Okay, so I'll keep moving. Part of the wellness trend is also the biophilia, the word. So people really want this feeling of being outdoors even if they aren't. It comes through in every consumer research study that I do. And it's a challenge for an industry that has, for many decades, delivered shopping centres as big boxes that shut out the outside world. So a little bit like a casino, you stay all day because you don't know what's going on outside, you can't see the light and the sun. And it's actually really challenging to turn some of those inside out. So if you can't turn the thing inside out and you can't give people actual fresh air and actual, you know, an outdoor experience, bringing as much green inside as you can is becoming really, really important, and consumers are wanting to see that happen en masse, and a lot of owners are doing it. But then for shopping centres that are extending, providing an outdoor experience is absolutely paramount now. You can't just build an internally facing box. People really want that access to fresh air, to green, to outdoors, and it's a really important part of you know, creating a dining offer and creating outdoor leisure. So really, really important to design and build in a way that helps people feel close to nature even if they're inside. We got another question, Shawn?
Yeah, sure. So Ben has asked another question. He asked, where do you see large format retail going? Working in this space, we're starting to see this bleed into shopping centre spaces now.
So are we talking about department stores and that sort of thing?
It's not obvious in the question, but I'd assume so, yes.
Yeah. So, you know, I think the Lifetime example, I'll just go back to that. I think it's really interesting. I think we originally thought, oh, well, it's, you know, it's going to all be about specialty and there isn't going to be any large format department stores. I've changed my view on that. I think we're going to see different uses moving in and taking over those spaces. So the challenge will be for the department store model, and I've got a couple of examples coming up that speak to that, is how can they, as a large retailer, adapt and provide that more experiential environment that people are looking for. And there are some retailers that are doing a lot of experimenting in this space. Macy's is one, Selfridges is another. But I very much think their ability to survive is going to be about like providing that experience, incorporating some of that creativity, learning experiences that people are looking for. And if they can't, I don't think it looks really good for them, to be honest. You know, you've got to adapt, and you know, adaptation is very much a part of the survival. And retailers that are adapting are doing well. But if you can't adapt and you can't change your model, then it doesn't look good. Yeah,
sure. So Ben's just clarified a little bit further on his question. He said he works for Pet Barn as the example.
Yeah.
But looking at HomeCo format as a cross concept with both bulk goods, large format provides the convenience with offers like Woolworths, etc.
Yeah. So that was Pet
Barn.
Pet Barn. Yeah. Look, if I had a business that my customers were pet owners at the moment, I'd be in a very happy place. People, as he would know, people spend a lot of money on their pets, and that is growing. In a lot of cases, that, you know, it's the fur baby thing, isn't it? So it's about, well, I might not have children, or my children have grown up and left, and I'm going to lavish all my love and attention on my pets. And I think that there's a lot of you know, I'm not an expert in obviously in that market. You know, sorry, is it Ben that you asked the question? Would definitely be the expert, but I think there's a lot of opportunity in that area, and I think it's about thinking, okay, well, what business are we in? Are we in the business of selling pet food and pet supplies, or are we in the business of creating, you know, experiences and around pet owners and letting them to show their love for their pets? So it might be like bringing in uses like doggy daycare or doggy training or exercise, you know, spaces where you can exercise with your pet. And I don't know, I'm sure he knows more than me, but I think in that particular segment, there's a massive amount of opportunity.
Just before we continue, sorry, Jen, Russell Lamb, the DMA MD, has also raised an interesting point. He said that the everything is wellness is very similar to one of the concepts of the recent longevity by design charrette that DMA hosted. That had the primary focus on retirement and aged care living, and they seem to be all melding together, these multi-purpose functions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very true. You know, the fact that you know, I work, one of my clients has a shopping centre up in Brisbane that has a aged care above the shopping centre, and they've created such a beautiful, amazing sanctuary up there. One of the shopping centre's biggest challenges is getting them to come downstairs and actually engage with the retail downstairs. But I'm certainly the owner of that property is really thinking about, well, you know, I've got this on-site community that is really focused on wellness and living well and, you know, making the most out of life. How do I make sure that what I offer on the ground plane as part of the retail experience it feeds into that to get them to want to come down and experience it and feel like it's a cohesive experience. So there's definitely a lot of synergy.
Very good.
So in terms of the insight behind that, consumers seeking greater connections to the outdoors, nature, blue skies, because it makes them feel better. And you know, that's the basic principle of biophilic design. You know, we are born in nature, we are part of nature, so we feel better when we're close to nature. I just realised I did another picture of that Burwood brickworks that I was talking about before. And so this is the rooftop gardening on the shopping centre. I applaud these guys for doing this. I wasn't involved in this project, but I wish I was because I've been trying to get owners to build green roofs and look at their rooftops differently for about 10 years. And it's always one of those things that gets value engineered out of the project. But I think rooftops are a massive, massive untapped opportunity. And we all need to think whether we're, you know, doing redevelopments or we're doing new builds or whatever, is how do we use that amazing space up above. And so Burwood Brickworks, as well as the Productive Urban Farm, they've got a restaurant up there called Acre that are from Sydney, and they do a sort of a farm to plate kind of concept. And I'm really looking forward to getting down and visiting this one when it's fully operational and just seeing how it goes, because I think a lot of owners and developers are doing the same, and if it's a success, I think we'll see a lot more of this, and I think about time. Just another example, if you cannot be open to the outdoors, how important it is to think about how do you bring that outdoor green feeling inside. This is a shopping centre in Sweden, where quite clearly they're not going to have a lot of outdoor activity, particularly in winter when you're down to like the -20s sometimes. But you know, they're trying to bring as much of that green inside as they possibly can and make it feel like a lush green living space, even though it's entirely enclosed. So the next insight is about from a place to shop to a place to connect, and I think this is really gets to the core of where the future is for shopping centres and what is the new role that they can play in people's lives. So we're seeing lots and lots of shopping centres focusing on providing free community facilities in their shopping centres, whether that be from, you know, great play experiences to West Wilcoomer's got barbecues, you know, free water play, spaces for the community to meet, you know, productive gardening, all sorts of different clubs and things. It's really thinking about the role of the shopping centre as not a place just to get stuff, it's a place for people to have experiences and to encourage the community to come together. And it's funny to be saying that at this time when we're actually trying to discourage people from gathering in shopping centres. But you know, I think that this longer term trend is still going to be very much part of our future. But I'll talk about post COVID in a minute. But it's a really big opportunity. Another thing that's happening, you see the example there, is that in order for the financial side of this all to stack up, so it's all very well to say, okay, great, you know, we've got this 100 square metre shopping centre. If we want to be relevant in the future, we have to provide community space. Well, where? So some places just don't have that opportunity to provide it. So they're looking at spaces that would potentially have gone unloved before. So for example, you know, unused spaces in car parks, laneways that are unloved, all different opportunities around the property where you could put something in for the community. Just a really simple example here of a service lane where they just painted it up and turned it into a basketball court. And it may seem ridiculously simple, but sometimes the first steps are simple. And this space originally was about somewhere for teens to hang out, but now this space hosts all sorts of parties, it hosts markets, they do silent discos, they do all sorts of things in this space. And when you look at it, it's really a very, very simple space. So I would encourage, if you're talking to clients, to not just focus on the obvious things, which is like, you know, beautiful sort of central gardens with lovely outdoor dining experiences. Think about those unexpected places and the edges where you could do something different that maybe doesn't cost a lot of money, but makes a lot of difference to the community that the shopping centre is in.
If I could just jump in there, Jen, there's a couple more questions. I'll just ask a couple now, and we might leave the rest until a bit later. So the first one here is from Shane Fraccia. Many developers, private major, etc., have been very slow and reluctant to embrace mixed use over the last 20 years, despite the remarkable success. I find this particularly in the retirement and aged care sectors. What do you think are the barriers for development in embracing mixed use in any sector?
I think it's a number of things. One of them is the financial side of it. So, for example, you might say, well, you know, if I make this city block, for example, all office space, I'm going to get the most return for my money on it. But so therefore, that's the best use. Or, but I think attitudes are changing towards that a little bit, because certainly what I'm seeing working on commercial mixed use projects is that some of these tenants are sort of saying, well, yeah, great, you've got a really nice building and lovely floor plates and great view, but tell us about the ground plane. So what is the experience you're going to offer besides the office space that is going to help me attract and retain talent? And that's becoming a really big driver. So hopefully that's that sort of change is driving some of these mixed use projects. I think it's also about lack of knowledge about some different uses. So if you're a developer who's only ever done residential, or you've only ever done retail, it can be kind of like, oh, a bit risky. You know, I'm looking, being asked to sort of think about categories which I'm not familiar with. So that could be part of it as well. But I think it will start to change slowly. But I think it's very much about understanding what is the synergistic effect of a mixed-use development versus a single use. So trying to quantify that extra value add. So if I have the office tower, what value does a retail ground plane and a beautiful outdoor space add to my building, and how do I quantify that? I think that's one of the biggest challenges. But the light at the end of the tunnel, I guess, is that there's more and more examples now actually being built where you can look to them and you can kind of say, right, well, why is that property successful? Oh, because it's, you know, it's got great office space or great residential apartment or whatever. But what people really love about it is the experience and the spaces in between. So what's the, you know, the public realm experience? What's the retail experience? And kind of being able to understand and quantify what all those different pieces, the value that they add to that property. I hope that sort of answers the question.
Very good. Just one more, if I may. There's a couple more, but we'll leave those until a bit later. So from Jamie Parsons, thank you for the webinar. Quite fascinating. What do you see the future of high-end department stores with, sorry, I've just lost it. It's moved. Yeah, the high-end department stores with high-quality customer service and boutique products and produce. examples noted here are Ginza, Matsukoshi in Tokyo. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. I'm certainly not.
Yeah, I am. I lived in Japan for a while, luckily.
Good.
The two things, I guess. Having a background in customer experience, I'm slavishly dedicated to the idea of great customer service. So I think that stores that can continue to offer a very bespoke, very customer responsive service, that will definitely be a role for them still. You know, some of the examples of not shopping centres, of department stores that aren't doing so well. I don't want to name names, but you can point to a fairly poor level of customer service as being one of their issues. But like any other, I think they still need to adapt, and they still need to provide experiences in the store. And so I'm not sort of aware of what that particular Japanese department store is doing, but if you look at some of the examples in the States that are doing well, they are really trialing all different things in terms of offering that experience. So you know, Harrods does unique, you know, experiences for customers, invitation only, things where you can try things, or personalisation, and all those sorts of things. I think it's, no matter what level you're at, I think in terms of your audience and you know, the sort of the average price of what you sell, wherever you're at, experience, I think, is going to be the key to what drives your success. So experience and service, very important. It'll just be executed differently depending on where your market is, but still really, really important. I mean, Selfridges, for example, is one of the most interesting ones. I've got an example coming up for them, but they are trialing all sorts of really interesting things. They even have a skateboard ramp in a large section of their store at one point. They've done quiet rooms, they've done all sorts of things, and I think it's about trying to find what is the right combination of experiences that's going to keep us relevant going forward.
Thank you.
That answer? Yeah. Okay, so beauty attracts. You've probably seen a lot of shopping centres are starting to put art in now, and recognising that you know, people don't just want to go to big vanilla boxes with lots of shops in them. They actually want you know, they want to see some beauty, and want something that's inspiring, and that's being manifested in things as simple as murals. It might be sort of installations, or some of these Instagram museums, although I think that's a fairly short-term trend coming to maturity now, where you can, you know, sort of wander through a space and take sort of all sorts of photos. But we're seeing more and more art going into shopping environments. In Hong Kong, there's a shopping centre mall called K11 that is, they call themselves an art mall, and they regularly host artists in residence, they regularly host exhibitions, those sorts of things. I think that's all part of you know, looking at what sort of experience can we provide, and then offering a cultural experience as being one of the many things that you could offer. So we're seeing a lot of that, and it's really, really nice to see. Okay, I'm going to move on to post-COVID-19 retail. A bit of a shout out to my epidemiologist consultant on this one, Darren White. I didn't want to talk about this without having any kind of reliable sort of input from someone. So I've run a lot of these thoughts past an epidemiologist, and it's very early days to be saying some of these things, but I think it's important that we talk about it and understand that whilst we may emerge out the other side of this current pandemic, and things might return to some version of normal, this could be a reoccurring thing, and the resilient properties are going to sort of say, well, you know, if this is the new life, and that we might go through periods of, you know, socialization might become a thing that we have to deal with on a regular basis, how can we become more resilient, and how can we create places that can respond to this sort of thing? So I've just kind of got, I guess, 4 thoughts really for post-COVID-19 retailer. The first thing to say is it will not be the same from everyone, okay? Some people are going to be like, thank God I can get out of the house, I can get dressed up, and I can go shopping, hallelujah. I'm okay, I feel fine, I'm not nervous, I'm not wary about the experience, I just want to get back in there, right? So there will be that element to the population, but there'll be another element to the population, and these are potentially people who have underlying health conditions, or they are older people, because as we have seen, COVID-19 is very much a disease that overwhelmingly affects this category of people, they're going to be nervous about coming back into public spaces and retail spaces. So what are some things we can do to meet the needs of those that can't wait to get back in, and then also meet the needs of those people that are potentially nervous and not that comfortable with going into a mass public gathering space again. So the first thought is about the culture of care, and how do we demonstrate and show our customers that we understand their concerns, and we're responding to it, and we're creating a place that can be safe in this sort of health crisis. One of the first thoughts is around healthy materials. So there's been a lot of chatter about what materials can the virus not, or any virus or any microbes or whatever, what do they not survive on? Is it copper? Are there particular surfaces out there that are antimicrobial? Do we need to start thinking about those things for handles and bathrooms and all those sorts of things? Is there an opportunity for us to start recommending to owners and developers that they incorporate some of these materials into their developments to stop the spread? Like I said, I'm not any kind of expert, but these are just some of the things that you might like to think about. Vulnerable groups. So we've seen, and this started overseas in Australia, has picked it up across all the supermarkets. We've seen the beginning of, selected hours for elderly shoppers, for example, to get into the shopping centre before everybody else and do their shopping. From one health professional's perspective, that is actually a little bit alarming, because we're saying, let's bring all the people that are most likely to suffer the worst from this virus and put them all in one place at the one time. So there's pluses and minuses, but I think this is something that we might see continuing, in that we need to think about how do we facilitate at-risk people being able to shop and get what they need and have that experience. Maybe we continue with these shopping hours into the future, who knows, but it's something to think about. Another thing that we're seeing is when Beijing started to open up retail again, Apple took everyone's temperature when they came into the store. And this is something that's been happening at Singapore Airport for years. Anyone who's flown to Singapore Airport, they've got an automated system whereby they take the temperature of incoming passengers. They've been doing this since the original SARS epidemic. So is that something that we're going to start seeing? Is it going to be that when there's heightened health concerns, that we actually have some sort of technology in the entries to our shopping centres where they actually monitor people's temperatures as they come in, as a way to be part of the response and to make people feel comfortable? Like I said, I don't know if any of these things are what might happen, but there's just sort of things to think about. In terms of feeling calm in a space, this is a Selfridges thing that I spoke about a couple of minutes ago. Selfridges actually introduced a quiet room. So it's a place that you can just go and sit, low lighting, and just chill out for a bit. And it might sound ridiculously simple and maybe a bit too obvious, but is that something that potentially shopping centre owners should be thinking of? How do we provide a space where people can just get a little bit of time out? And I know these things are sort of interest to parents with children with autism as well. Like, is there a place where they can go and be quiet, low stimulus, a sensory space where they feel safe? And maybe this is something that that shopping centres need to adopt into the future. Was there another question, Shawn? Or?
Yes.
Yep.
So Owen Coonan asks, for design and project managers, where do you see our roles having the best practical effect in the changing landscape? Education of clients or pushing new changes?
I think that's a really good question, and one that I've been thinking about too. I think what we can do after this period is to say, okay, these are the types of things we need to think about. How can we, as the experts, and certainly in businesses like DMA Engineers, as the solutions people, how can you help clients understand what their options might be? So it might not be your role to sort of push for it and say, oh, you must have temperature testing at the doors, but if you can show that you understand what the concerns might be of some of your clients, you might be able to say, hey, we've thought about these things, and here's some ideas that we'd like to share with you in ways that you might have an excellent technical solution to these things. So I think it's an opportunity, And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this today. I don't have the answers. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a technical specialist. But I can imagine that my clients will be talking about these things, and to be able to go to them and say, hey, we've thought about this already and we have some ideas as how you might be able to achieve some of these things. I think it's definitely an opportunity to think about, because owners and developers are certainly going to be grappling with these things.
Very good. There's lots of questions coming through. If I can just
jump in
at this point, that'd be great. So, the shopping centre local custom. This is from Nigel Harris. Sorry.
Yep.
With shopping centre local custom intercity, will they now look to target national and international custom? For example, with the entertainment and experience value they seek to offer, will that become part of a holiday destination, and all that? What will all that entail?
So just to paraphrase, make sure I understand the question right. So are we saying that shopping centres are going to start looking for new markets? Is that right, in terms of tourism?
It sounds like it, like yeah, as a holiday destination in particular.
Yeah, I think I'll use an example of a project that I've worked on. Pacific Fair up in Queensland is already a destination and an attraction for visitors. So I think it's about 35 to 40% of the customers that shop in that centre are tourists. So I think it very much depends on what is the context of your shopping centre and where is it. So if you're a smaller convenience-based centre and you're in a rural area that may be, or sort of a suburban area that doesn't have a lot of tourism, I probably would say you'd be really hard pressed to chase that market. But if you are in an area where you have like a lot of tourism infrastructure around you, you have tourists visiting there for other things that place offers, like the Gold Coast does, I think there's definitely a market there to be part of that experience. And Pacific Fair, by way of example, is very conscious of that. But it's also really important to remember that and I speak from experience, having worked in tourism marketing for a number of years, that tourists seek to go where locals go. So any shopping centre or any destination or entertainment destination that says, well, I really want to target tourists, a degree of local authenticity is going to be really important to what they offer. So any shopping centre that said, well, I'm all about the tourists now, and I'm going to just target that, will do that to their peril, really, because you know, your locals are sort of, I guess, what drives you at a fundamental level, and then tourists are interested in going places that the locals go. So it's important to keep that balanced sense of perspective. And there are examples, Chadstone's one, of being very targeted in the way that they attract tourists, and that they're building I think it's open, a hotel that's on top of that property, and really offering an all-encompassing experience, a place where you can dine, shop, stay, you can do the whole thing. We've seen that a lot in Asia, but it's quite new for Australia. But I certainly think that there's opportunity there if you're in the right place to attract tourists, or you've got that kind of market coming to where you are already.
Very good.
Any others, or we'll keep going?
I can do more, or I can leave them to the end if you like. I'm happy to do more.
Let me move to the end, and then we'll see if we can as many as we can get in as we can.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so second thought around retail post COVID-19 is this rapid adaptation. Now, I found this fascinating. I've been loving seeing all the ways that companies are innovating really fast in this environment. And it's also giving brands permissions to do something different. So I think if in the hand sanitizer from the distilleries is a classic example of that. I think if you had a heap of executives from a company that made gin sitting around 6 months ago going, oh, we should really move into the hand sanitizer market, I think that would have been an impossible exercise. It would have cost them a fortune, because customers would have kind of gone, why would I buy hand sanitizer from you? It just didn't make sense. But the current situation has made it possible for brands to rapidly adapt and do things differently, and quickly move into spaces that they could never have operated in before. So I think it's fascinating, and I think this idea of rapidly adapting to your environment and is really interesting. And I think what it means to shopping centres is that they need to kind of, I guess, tool up so that if something like this happens again, and I think it will, they are able to adapt to the circumstance really, really quickly, and sort of not sort of be faced with no other option other than just to close the doors. So, you know, they need to be able to react. So I think rapid adaptation is a trend I'm really interested in. Some of the ideas around that you might want to explore, one of them is around flow and density management. So I was talking to Darren White, the epidemiologist who I consulted for this webinar, and I said to him, you know, what's important, like what matters in these spaces? And he said, well, one of the things is that one of the reasons these things spread is because of flows and the fact that, you know, the density is high, and you're likely to, if you've got, you know, symptoms, you're going to spread to more people. But one thing is also the directions that people move. So if you're moving back and forth in the same space quite a lot, you come face to face with a lot more people than you would if you were kind of going IKEA style through a store or a shopping centre. So I don't have the solution here, but any smart ideas for managing flow and managing density, something that might be interesting in a situation that we're in now, where you've got to sort of, you know, try and keep retail going but then also reduce transmission. So flow and density management was something that I thought was worth mentioning. Overnight category changes I think is really interesting. That photo's there from that chain of pubs that overnight went from pub to convenience store, and you can get your loo paper and your milk and whatever you need from there. And we're seeing lots of that happening, where retailers are going, right, I can't do what I did before. What is the thing that's most needed, and how can I adapt to survive? And I think overnight category changes are really interesting, and it's sort of also as part of food as well. That next example of find fast to go, I applaud all these restaurants who have never, you know, always been about a high eat-in experience, and all of a sudden they're turning around a takeaway experience. And you know, it's been driven by commercial necessity to survive, but I think it's really, really interesting as what role could a shopping centre play in helping its tenants really, really quickly turn around their model to meet the needs of takeaway or delivery and those sorts of things. So I noticed a few days ago that Westfield have actually come out with an app already that helps you order from multiple food stores at once and then pick it all up in one go. So I think that shopping centre owners are potentially have a role to play in helping tenants come together and be able to make those sorts of fast adaptations. Another big thing we're seeing is, for example, I don't think it's happened in Australia, but overseas, IKEA have turned over their car parks as a place where you can get drive-through COVID-19 virus testing. So another example of rapid adaptation. They might not be making any money from it, but how amazing that they're able to sort of offer something that is in desperate need at that time, and think about, well, we can't do what we normally can do, but what can we do to help? How can we be part of the solution? So is there a role to play for shopping centre car parks that are almost empty to actually become pop-up clinics for drive-through testing or drive-through vaccinations or health checks or whatever? So is that something that we could facilitate? The third thought was around hands-free environments. We're seeing, you know, all sorts of things pop up. So this is an example of a 3D printed door handle that you can, it's a bit crude, but you know, quickly print out, install in place so that people don't have to touch door handles. So I think there's loads of opportunity for smart engineers and designers to come up with ways to make environments low touch. So low touch delivery, there's a bookstore that is closed the store, but they've got a drive-through operation whereby you can, you know, order your books online and swing past a window and grab your books. So what are all the different ways that we can think about facilitating delivery that's low touch and makes people feel safe? Glovo is it's like the Uber Eats of anything you could possibly want to buy. They're operating in Brazil and Italy and Europe. Europe, Italy being part of Europe, called Glovo, and their model is anything, anytime. So they will go and get anything that you could want and deliver it to your home, not just food, not just a single category, but anything at all. And I think we're going to see the rise of these services, you know, a lot more as a result of what's happening at the moment. Virtual queuing is another one that we're seeing, whether it's a queue in your car or whether it's you know, a queue on the street. How do we, particularly for these sort of pickup services, how do we manage queues of people? So I know in my area, which is really Bondi, which is really restaurant dense, a lot of restaurants are offering this facility whereby you order something and then you swing by in your car and you grab it through the window and off you go. What role could our shopping centres play in being places where you can swing by and pick up a whole heap of things at once? And what's the technology to manage that? What do you need from an infrastructure point of view? I think there's a lot of sort of interesting ideas and thinking that could go into solving this one. And then the fourth trend is, sorry, I can't read the headline very well, is about, not so much trend, but idea is about together apart. So a lot of the things that we've talked about in the last half an hour have been about shopping centres as places where people can come together. How do you facilitate togetherness when we're trying to stay apart? So I thought this was an interesting one, and it's interesting to see what retailers are doing. So that background there is from Lululemon's doing Zoom online fitness classes where everyone tunes in from home and they all do a fitness class together, but they do it virtually. And you're probably thinking, well, what has that got to do with shopping centres? But I think it actually has a lot to do with shopping centres, because if we want to facilitate some of our retailers from switching from a in-person channel to a virtual channel, we might be able to help them do that so that they actually do that from their store. So maybe it's teleconsults from the retail store, maybe it's you know, exercise classes from the retail store. What does that mean? Well, it means access to flexible space, it means high bandwidth, it means you know, all sorts of technology that enables them to stay connected to customers, but potentially use their retail staff in store to do that, even if you can't go in store. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. An interesting example is, sorry, and I know I've gone over time, so I'm going to try and be quick. JD.com, which is a big Japanese sort of drink supplier, is doing virtual nightclubs where, you know, for 3 hours they live stream a DJ into your house, and they sell their alcohol products in between, you know, the DJ sets, etc. And so they're trying to create a virtual club environment as a channel to sell their products. So again, bringing people together but keeping them apart. Credo is another interesting example. That's a beauty retailer in the UK. They switched to doing online consultations for all their products direct from their store. So you have a virtual consultation. So the store can't be open, but the staff are still there and they're still providing service and selling products. And the final one, and I will end shortly, interesting to see the rise of the online wine clubs, so that you get some wines delivered and then you do a live tasting session. And you could imagine that some of our bottle shop retailers might be interested in doing this, and so engaging customers by doing a wine tasting that's virtual, and you talk to people and you're connecting with other people, but you're actually not physically together while you do it. So just final points, I guess, about some of the new challenges that shopping centre owners are facing. So how do we become a safe space during a mass health crisis? How do we create a public environment that looks and feels safer? How do we facilitate one-stop multi-retailer convenience to the home? How do we support retailers to maintain their connections with customers remotely? And how do we best help retailers meet demand peaks and troughs and rapidly switch distribution channels? I think all of these questions are things that retailers and shopping centre owners are going to be thinking about, and things that you might be able to come up with some smart solutions to help them to answer some of those questions. So I've gone over time, I'm so sorry. But if anyone's still on the line, maybe is there any more questions?
Yeah, sure. So we'll stay online for a few extra minutes to answer any final questions for anyone who wants to stay, but of course we will have a recording to send around of the entire webinar as well if people need to go. But Jen, if I could just start to go through some of the questions that have come through. So thanks to everyone for engaging extremely well. The first one here is from Yagan Nadu again. So majority of the shopping centres are return on investment driven with focus on certain traditional anchor tenants. How do you justify or motivate lettable area to be used for community open space?
So yeah, well, that is absolutely a challenge. So so I've work for some of these companies, so I understand the formulas really well. You know, you have a certain number of square meters of lettable space, you certain rates against that, and you need to make those returns. But the conversations that I'm having, and I talk to a lot of fund managers about this stuff directly, because at the end of the day, if a shopping centre is owned by an investment fund, you know, it's all very well to say, oh, look, we can have art, and we can have green, and we can have all these great things, but tell me about what the rate of return will be. And I say to them, you know, we need to think about what we are doing to be relevant and resilient in terms of maintaining our audiences. So if we can bring in other usages that attract people to stay longer, visit more often, and come for more reasons, we are going to start pushing the dial on those very important shopping centre metrics of dwell time and traffic. And you know, sometimes it is very difficult. I get asked some very odd questions, like, if I put this mural in, tell me about how many more dollars I will make out of sales. And obviously you can't do that for small individual interventions, but it's a cumulative effect. So if you do a few of these things, so if you provide more experiences, things to do, make the place more visually appealing, you know, improve that ambience and make it a nicer place to be, people will come more often, they've got more reasons to come, and they will stay longer. And those are the really important metrics to be talking to your shopping centre clients about, because they're the things that they measure every week.
No worries. I think Kath, you'd like to answer the question as well, according to the Q&A box. Are you there? No? Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next one. It's more of a comment. Historic. Oh, sorry, Kath. You there? No?
Yep. Yes.
Yes, you are. Okay. All yours.
Sorry, sorry, I missed that.
Oh, sorry. I was just looking in the Q&A box. It said you would like to answer this question live. Thought you were looking to chime in.
Oh, no, that's for Jen to answer it live. So, yep, keep going.
Right. My bad. So the next question or comment is from Len Powell. Historically, the problem with vertical mixed use in Brisbane has been the obstacles that financiers and value has put in the way, and that's probably feeds into that last question, I'd imagine. With obviously return on investment being a high priority.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a conversation I've had heaps over the years, and I think it comes down to understanding what's the value proposition for your end customer. So if you're for example, you know, doing a project that's driven primarily by commercial office space, for example, you may be trying to attract a kind of tenant that has a very young workforce that, you know, they want to work in a place that has, you know, lots of places to eat and things to do and outdoor spaces and all that kind of thing. And I have, I can't mention the name of the tenant, but I've actually had that very same experience in the last year, where a major international consulting business chose to be in a building because of what the ground plane offered. Because they knew that it was critical to them attracting and keeping their best talent. So I think the conversation needs to shift beyond, you know, well, what's the most money I could get per square metre for this space, to what would add value to it to make it a really, you know, sought after place to be. And I think developers and owners are starting to get more sophisticated around this and understand that it's not just about, you know, putting in what they call the highest and best use. It's also about how do I add value to the space and make sure that it's a really appealing place.
Okay, excellent, thank you. The next question is about something that's been bugging me as well, or scratching at my itch to ask you a question as well. So the question from, well, it's anonymous, we'll call him AA. You see shopping centres continuing to be driven by car parking availability, and my question is, are these developments that you're talking about, the examples that you've seen, are they driven by high density areas, or are there examples of low density areas, or at least I guess geographically spread out areas also adopting these approaches?
Oh, seeing it in all kinds of places. It's really interesting you mentioned car parking, because I had a car parking example in here, but my presentation was too long and I pulled it out. But one of the things I was going to raise as an interesting trend is looking to really dense cities overseas and seeing what's happened when the population changes and not very many people have cars anymore, and all of a sudden we've got all these multi-storey parking facilities and not enough cars. Australia's to fill them. Australia's not at that point yet. Still, the success metric for any shopping centre is lots of people are complaining about the car park. Oh, good, because if they're complaining about the car park, that means the car park's full. When they're not complaining, people start to worry. But yeah, definitely, Australia's still at a point where you know, lots of car parking is really, really important. But I think in some of our city areas, we might start to see less people driving. Certainly, the rate of young people getting their driver's license has started to drop for the first time in, I think, 30 years, because there's so many options for getting around now. People are going, oh, I can't be bothered, you know, 100 hours of learning and I can just get an Uber. So that trend might take longer to kick in Australia. But one challenge that I would put out to the engineers is, how can you design a car park so that in the future it can become something else? Could it become apartments? Could it become office space? You know, how could you help your clients think about the long-term success of some of the decisions that are made in building and construction now? Because in all over London, and we've got a bit of time to go before we get there, but all over London there are big multi-storey car parks, and they're trying to find things to do with them. But because they weren't built with a different future in mind, it's actually really hard to use those structures. But car parking is a really interesting one. But in terms of facilities for the communities and all that kind of stuff, we see as much demand in smaller outer suburban shopping centres with lots of space, even more so in some cases, because there's nowhere, there might be in an area where there's actually nowhere for people to go and have a nice family meal. So if you can offer a place where there's room for the kids to play and you can have a nice meal outdoors in the evening or something, we find that it actually goes off really well, because they're like, oh, thank God, I've been dying to have this amenity in my area, and it's great that it's down the road at my local shopping centre. I don't have to drive 20 minutes to get there. So definitely there's a solution for denser and less denser places.
Okay, next question here is from Alan Potgieter, who's a director at DMA. When we come through COVID-19, we could expect to see high levels of vacancies because some shops have closed doors, Flight Centre, Peter Alexander, Just Jeans, etc. What would be the short-term solution or change for centre owners to overcome this? And will this lead to a significant review of rental lease rates to stem the number of vacancies?
I'm probably not going to comment on the rent question, because that's probably a question that I would put to an owner of a property. But will we see some retailers that don't make it? Absolutely. Are we going to have holes? Absolutely. I spend a lot of time working with shopping centre owners who might be going through things like redevelopments or remixing where they have holes, and help them come up with short-term ways to activate some of those spaces. And a lot of time those solutions are very sort of community focused spaces. So you know, providing play areas and providing workshop spaces and providing places for the community to do charity projects, all sorts of things. So in the short term, it's just a matter of how many spaces are there going to be, and how do we support shopping centres in sort of activating some of those spaces, and then potentially thinking about you know, using it as an opportunity to remix as well, and to bring in other usages that might make the space a bit more resilient. So we might see some of these leisure opportunities coming in, some of the co-working, that sort of thing. But do I think there's going to be a period of vacancies? Absolutely.
Very good, thank you. Hayley Phillips asks, as an urban designer, how can we work better with retail operators to achieve more beautiful active uses on the street and not internally focused?
Oh, look, you know, you speak in my language. I'm always talking to them about, think about the edges, think like a street, don't think like a mall. I think some shopping centre owners are starting to change their attitude towards this, and they understand that that, you know, that if we want to get an experience that is more like an experience that you would have outdoors or on a high street or something, we have to actually loosen up some of those design guidelines for those for those facades, and a lot of designers that I work with are very much pushing that space. So trying to open up facades and make them more permeable and make them engage more with the street. There's some really good examples out there in shopping centres that are starting to do that really well. But one thing I've grown fond of saying lately is think like a street, don't think like a mall. Think about how you can open up and provide some personality to the front of your store. And I think the examples are out there. It's just about changing people's thinking and hopefully getting to work with those retail design tenancy coordinators that really get it and understand what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, sure. And we can see through development policy as well, in particular the Brisbane City Council is demanding more street activation from retail developments and commercial developments as well, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and there's some really great examples. I think Brisbane's got some of the best examples. So King Street, for example, I know that's suffered a little bit from the loss of a major retailer over there at the RNA, but I love what they've done with the footpath there and the way that they've built the experience out of the tenancy right to the edge of the road. I think that's fantastic, and I think if we can start to sort of apply some of those principles in shopping centres, we'll create a lot more energy and a lot more interest and a lot more activation on the edges. And get away from that kind of sterile feel.
Very good. So the next one here is from Yagan Naidu again. So Jennifer, are you seeing a trend by developers to include infrastructure sustainability, and are they willing to pay for this as an additional professional service to their professional team?
Yes, I'm seeing the desire to include it. Whether or not sometimes it doesn't always make the cut. I think that kind of comes down to the philosophy of the company as a whole. So, for example, the Burwood Brickworks example, I knew that that was kind of embedded in their philosophy for that project, that no matter what, it would become one of the most sustainable shopping centres in the world, and they wouldn't erode that purpose. And I applaud them for doing that, because it's the things like the extra sustainable initiatives and the art and the community stuff that always gets cut during the value engineering process. But I think it comes down to the project vision at the beginning, and sort of saying, well, how important do we think this is? And if it's important, then we're going to keep it in no matter what, and don't allow it to be something that gets lost towards the end of the value engineering life cycle. I think it comes down to the philosophy of the developer and the owner. If it's very important to them as a business and they see that being a key part of what they stand for going forward, it's going to be easier to get them to sort of keep it in the project. But if it's viewed as like a nice to have add-on, it's going to get lost from the project. So, but I think the challenge for the engineers and designers is to sort of help them do these things in a way that that sort of can make economic sense, as well as kind of philosophical sense, if that makes sense.
No trouble. Just one more, Jen. Great webinar. This is from Len Power. Do we need to find a balance between the commercial return and social capital created by the retail mixed-use development has to be relevant and appropriate to its context? Sounds as though the village might make a comeback.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how you can view some of these community facilities, because looking from the outside, if a shopping centre puts in barbecues and play areas and all that sort of stuff, that is a nice thing to do. And being the place that the community comes together is a great thing to do. But there's a hard commercial side to that as well. It's about driving traffic and building connection. People have a lot of choice in terms of where they spend their free time, and shopping centres that appeal to people on a kind of a leisure sort of basis, they're competing with all sorts of other things. They're competing with parks, they're competing with cinemas, they're competing with retail strips. It's not just about shopping centre competing with shopping centre. So the more you can become relevant to the lives of the community, and the more reasons you can give them to come, and the more you can connect them to them, there is a definite commercial outcome to that. You know, more visitation, more dwell time, more spend. Absolutely, those metrics are there. If it happens to also be the right thing to do and great for you know, for society and the community, I think that's a win-win.
Very good. Okay, so that if there's no further questions, thanks to everyone for interacting to the extent that you did. It's been fantastic. So if there's no more further questions, we'll wrap up now and close the webinar. Thank you so much to Jennifer for taking the time to join us this morning and sharing your extensive experience and insights. And a couple of items that have really piqued my interest are the transforming of shopping centres into hubs for multi-use spaces, including entertainment and even community centres, as they seem to be becoming in the near future. And the other one is the undervalue of laneways and roofs as well. I think that's an area to watch.
Thanks very much for inviting me, Shawn.
That's all right. So if anyone would like to reach out to Jennifer directly with any questions, you can email her on the address on the screen. We'll also include her contact details and email when we send out the recording. We hope that attending the webinar today has been of real value to you. We will be running more webinars in the future on interesting topics related to the buildings and designs. If you'd like to be kept up to date on future events like this, just make sure you're following the DMA Engineers on LinkedIn. Keep an eye out in your inboxes for the recording of this webinar, which will come through in about 24 hours. Thanks very much for attending.
Thanks, Shawn.